Hey, and how you doing, folks? Yours truly, Randy Rand here for another edition of today's talk. Welcome. Today we spoke to Dr. Nekeshia Hammond, who's now a friend of the show, and Dr. Hammond is going to be participating, as she did today, in my series called Poverty and its effect upon children that are striving to do well academically. And today we discuss that very topic and the many different ways that uh, poverty can affect children as they strive to do well academically, and the draining effect that poverty has on them to do well academically. We also described or discussed some strategies that actually that she brought up to address poverty with children, as well as them better enabling them to do well academically. It's a great interview, and again, we're going to be talking to her as well as others during this series about poverty and its effect that it has on children that are striving to do well academically. And I hope you enjoy the interview. Thanks for the time. And we're back. Yours truly, Randy Rand, and, here, and welcome to another version of today's talk. We are speaking to Dr. Nekeshia Hammond. She is the founder of Hammond Psychology and Associates down there in Florida, and this is her second time on the show, as she is now a friend of the show. Welcome, Dr. Hammond.
Thank you.
I want to first ask you, what are some of the what are some of the contributing factors to poverty?
Well, some of the contributing factors, it actually depends because there's what we call chronic poverty and then there are situational poverty. So when you think of poverty when someone loses their job, when they're laid off, when something, maybe a loss of a loved one, has caused poverty versus a chronic generational poverty, and then we're looking at possible homelessness and issues with food, maybe a parent is in jail or absent, and some of those things also contribute to poverty.
Okay, now could you please speak about how children can be left behind in today's technological and academic environment if they cannot afford the technology, say the internet, Wi-Fi, and broadband, that's necessary to compete and learn?
Poverty has a huge impact, we're seeing definitely in the literature, because unfortunately when children in poverty are compared to their peers and they don't have the iPads and the iPhones and all the tablets and things like that where they can literally look up the information. I know we have here in our district, there was a huge issue that we were having in some of the F schools where the children had no access to the internet at home, which to many of us may sound surprising, like, what do you mean? But there, of course, is a large population of children, and we're talking about homeless children or even children living in very low-income housing that have absolutely no internet. So when you have an assignment, when you have to look something up and you don't know the information, you can't complete your homework. So it starts from there.
Dr. Hammond, I want to know what's your opinion about the development of a program or say programs that address the need of children whom can't afford computers, Wi-Fi, broadband, or internet.
I think that is absolutely vital. I know here in our community, we used to have a certain cable company that what they did was offer very low-cost internet services.
Uh-huh.
They were practically giving away very low-cost computers, iPads, things of that nature, because what happens is really, like I said, the community has to get together. So the companies that have billions of dollars and are able to donate these sorts of things to communities in need, and the schools that are able to say, you know what, let's donate some of our dollars to the schools in need, as well as the community members, too, that have those connections or are able to help out in that way. I mean, it's a huge barrier, like you said, when you do not have the resources to even begin to compete in the academic world. So we definitely need to come together as a community and help these individuals.
Now, do you believe such programs could work on a long-term basis? Why or why not?
I absolutely do. I definitely have hope, but but they really need to be well established. So it is a matter of getting people to donate and getting people involved, but we really need to establish programs that are long term. We really need to say, hey, if this particular company or these 5, 10 companies work together in this particular community, we have to have long term goals, as you mentioned. So it cannot be we're having a drive to bring in computers. It needs to be we have a 5, 10, 20-year plan for these communities. And a lot of times there are plans like that. And some, as we've seen throughout the nation, some are working and some are not. But it definitely has to be a long-term plan, like you said, to be successful.
Now, I want to change gears a little bit and get into discussing job spatial mismatch. And for our audience, I'll define it. The definition of job spatial mismatch is the mismatch between where low income households reside and suitable job opportunities are located. It has mostly been understood as a phenomenon affecting African Americans as a result of residential segregation, economic restructuring. Many people in different cultures struggle with poverty. In many instances, job spatial mismatch can be a contributing factor to this. Would you agree or not, or would you not agree? Please explain.
I would definitely agree that the issues that we face, particularly in this country with ethnic minorities and the disparities that we see when it comes to employment has definitely impacted the poverty rates in various ethnic minority communities, and we definitely already see that in the research. The opportunities are not the same. The school system, to begin with, is definitely not equal as we would like to think, nor is the job market. That absolutely contributes to the poverty rates that we're seeing and the reasons why there's such a difference in the employment and the earnings in these individuals.
We are speaking to Dr. Nekeshia Hammond. She is the founder of Hammond Psychology and Associates down in Florida. And she's giving us some of her very valuable time today as we are discussing how poverty has a detrimental effect on children academically. Dr. Hammond, Cynthia Rogers said in an article that she wrote for the Journal of Urban Economics, and I quote, individuals with more access to employment are found to have shorter unemployment spells, end of quote. My question is, how can parents successfully combat against this job spatial mismatch in order to provide high quality academic opportunities for their children?
I really think that it comes down to accessing and utilizing the community resources, because what I have found, unfortunately, is sometimes, well, one of two things. Either parents do not know of the resources that are available to them, or they do know the resources that are available to them, but they're not utilizing those resources. And when I say resources, I mean there are academic opportunities for children that are not necessarily in the schools. There's a lot
Hmm.
of times that I've worked with many failing F schools, and the opportunities are not there. I mean, whether it be there's no textbooks or the lack of the technology, but outside of that school system, there may be free tutoring for children, or there may be other programs that the parents can get involved with to help not only their children, but sometimes themselves. We're talking about GED programs or whatever it may be for them to be more successful and be more competitive in the employment market, which we know is going to have a positive impact on their children as well. So again, it's about access and it's about utilizing the resources that are there.
In another article that was written by Sarah McLafferty and Valerie Preston, which was entitled Spatial Mismatch in Labor Market Segmentation for African Americans and Latino Women, in economic, in the, I think it was a journal, the Economic Geography, minority women have poorer spatial access to jobs than white women, but they typically have better spatial access to employment than minority men. Dr. Hammond, in your opinion, would this account for such high poverty rates in the African American community?
I would say so. I would say it's a huge contributing factor. And the research still is showing that many, in some ethnic minority households, Many of them are headed by women.
Hmm.
So when we look at women and their women from ethnic minority backgrounds and their employment and their earnings, absolutely, when there's such a disparity between their white counter or our white counterparts, then it makes it really difficult when it comes to the poverty rates. And not only that, but also we definitely have to take into account there obviously is still racism, there's still discrimination in the workplace. So all of these things also impact employment and earnings, which further lead more into the poverty rates that we're seeing.
Now, you mentioned racism, and
Mm.
certainly there is racism. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, and there's no way around it. But um, do you believe? And again, this question just came to me. And do you think that, say, if we as African Americans took more of an initiative to create programs that would benefit our children, benefit our communities, could we? Do you think that would be a very good way forward, or the best way forward? Certainly, worth a try.
Oh, yes,
Hmm.
hands down, yes. There definitely needs to be more programs because the fact of the matter is, like I said, yes, racism is here, and the fact of the matter is, when children are from ethnic minority backgrounds, plenty of research studies have shown they do not have the same childhood as Caucasian counterparts. They
Hmm.
don't. There are more stressors, especially when you throw poverty into the mix. And we're talking about what's called toxic stressors.
Hmm.
So this is not just a one-time event that happens that's sad and that's negative. There could be drug abuse. There could be domestic violence in the home. There's community violence and school violence and all of these other things that are truly impacting the child. So absolutely, there needs to be more programs geared towards children in these situations. Otherwise, the reason why we see it on repeat in the cycle and the generational pattern is because there's nothing that's intervening that is successful enough to stop the pattern. But it definitely needs to be done, and we need more programs, absolutely.
And those programs, say like the ones that I'm trying to develop or I'm in the process of developing, uh, would be a good intervening tool, especially if it's done for the long term. Would you say?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, and there's different levels of programs. So because I mean, poverty can affect the community, it can affect a school. Definitely, I've definitely seen it affect the schools, and it can affect families. So there are so many ways. There's just so much need. There's so many ways to develop these programs. It could be for the family themselves. It could be with particular schools, or it could be a community-wide effort, an initiative. But nonetheless, definitely we need the programs. And I mean, I would say for policymakers, we definitely need more funding for mental health and for the well-being of children,
Hmm.
academically, physically, emotionally.
You mentioned policy. What types of policy would you like to see established in order to successfully fight against poverty?
Which they're working on in Congress right now, but I really would like to see more mental health funding because the fact of the matter is when it comes to poverty, generally, it comes with more stressors. Now, there are some children that, regardless of any situation, they are very resilient, and they'll bounce back from that. But there are many children that are deeply affected by poverty, and with mental health funding, we can start to talk to these children and process the things that they're seeing, especially the school violence and the community violence that they're witnessing, and no one is talking to them about it, which has detrimental impact on them. We're looking at a lot of untreated post-traumatic stress that's happening with children. They're seeing too much for their age and don't know how to handle it. And then again, like I said, it turns into another cycle, and we wonder at 10 years old why this particular child is bringing a gun to school. And it's like, well, hold on. There's a history of poverty and violence and homelessness and all these other things that have never been addressed or talked to with this child. So I would really like to see a lot of policy towards mental health funding, particularly with school violence and particularly with this issue of poverty, and talking to these children about what's going on with them.
We have been speaking with Dr. Nekeshia Hammond. She is the founder of Hammond Psychology and Associates down there in the state of Florida. And she's so very nice to give us some of her very valuable time today as we are discussing how poverty has a detrimental effect on children academically. Final question, Dr. Hammond. If you could please speak about how easy it is to find yourself in poverty if you're not careful.
Yeah, and it absolutely is. I think that the biggest myth is that people think that poverty is someone that's homeless and they've been homeless their whole lives. And it's really not true because we see all the time on the news, there are huge companies with massive layoffs. Things happen. Or there's a loss of a loved one. So there's a loss of a spouse or a partner. Nowadays, we're hearing that families are taking care of not only their children but also their parents. So that's another stressor sometimes financially. So there's many ways to get into poverty. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, there's chronic poverty, but there's also what I would call the situational poverty, which is one of those methods or something else where you basically start to dip into poverty. So this is something that can affect anyone. I mean, I've met people that have had a lot of wealth and have lost all of it.
Wow.
And they're applying for Social Security benefits.
Oh,
You know what I mean? So no one is immune to this.
sure.
It doesn't matter how much you have.
It can definitely hit home. Believe you me, it can certainly hit home.
Yeah.
As like you said, people have great job or have a great situation
Hmm.
going on, and the next thing you know, all hell breaks loose, and
Yeah.
they're trying to apply for benefits before you know it.
Yeah.
It's a very serious issue, especially in this day and time with the economy not being where we'd want it to be, and certainly those with children, looking forward, those with children, they want the best education for their children, and in many instances in our community, we're not getting the education that we need, or that they are not getting the education that they need to be prosperous in the future. I call them 21st century skill sets. Certainly, that's another story for another day, but it's very vital. It's very vital, and poverty has a lot to do with that, because if you can't pay the bills, well, you know, you certainly can't afford for your child. You can't pay for your child to have the tools they need to be successful. Certainly.
Right. Exactly. And we're talking about when we think about hunger and lack of food, how can you concentrate in school if you're hungry?
Yep.
I mean, it's basic needs. Or if you slept, you know, on the street the
Yeah.
night before and you slept for 2 hours, how can you function in school as a child? So there's a lot of things that we don't think about with children living in poverty. And one thing I did want to share, as far as the poverty rates for your listeners, are that the poverty rate, one of the latest data, is for Black and Hispanic families, it's actually 3 times the rate as
Wow.
white families. So this is something, it's an epidemic right now, and it's a crisis that we need to address.
We have been speaking with Dr. Nekeshia Hammond. She is the founder of Hammond Psychology and Associates down there in the state of Florida. She is so graciously giving us some of her very valuable time today as we have been discussing how poverty has a detrimental effect on children academically. In closing, Dr. Hammond, I would first like to say that, again, thank you for giving us some of your time today. And also, I would like to revisit this issue with you, as there are many components to this, I think, that needs to be discussed. Um,
I totally agree.
and having said that, please feel free to plug your website or any projects that you are presently involved with.
Sure. So one of the things that I am excited about with families is to help them in the role of parenting. Is I've just come out with a new book. It's the Practical Guide to Raising Emotionally Healthy Children, and it is available on Amazon as a paperback or as an ebook. So I'm just really looking forward to helping families in the journey of parenting. And again, like I said, it's on Amazon.
Okay, that is going to do it for our interview today. Dr. Hammond, again, thank you so very much for giving us some of your time. And I will be in touch with you down the road as we revisit this topic of poverty, as we really need to delve into it, as it is, like you said, an epidemic, and it needs to be dealt with, certainly.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Thank you so very much.